Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are going to tackle one of the most useful design patterns out there, the observer pattern. We're going to see how it takes a really common, often messy coding problem and turns it into something, well, something elegant and super scalable. Let's jump right in.
So here's the big question, right? This is really the heart of it all. You've got one object, your single source of truth, and when its state changes, you need to tell a whole bunch of other objects about it. But here's the tricky part. How do you do that when you don't want that main object to know anything about who it's talking to? That's the puzzle we're going to solve.
To really get our heads around this, let's use a classic example, a stock market app. Imagine we've got a stock, say for a company like Apple. Its price is going up and down all day. And then you have a bunch of different investors who all want to know instantly the second that price changes. On the surface, it sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it?
Okay, so if you were to code this up, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Well, that first, most obvious approach can actually lead us down a really fragile path. We're going to look at that first attempt, the one that kind of works for a minute, but then starts to crack and break as soon as things get even a little bit complicated.
And boom, this one line of code right here is the villain of our story. Inside our stock class, we've literally created variables for _investor1 and _investor2. The stock knows them by name. This creates a hardwired direct connection, and that's where all the trouble begins.
Yeah, see, that direct link creates a whole cascade of problems. First, you've got what we call tight coupling. The stock class and the investor class are basically tangled together in this messy knot. That makes your system super fragile. And what about scalability? A third investor comes along. What do? You literally have to open up the stock class and change the code. That's just not going to work long term. And on top of all that, you're breaking a really important design rule. Your stock class is now doing two totally different jobs. It's managing the stock's data, and it's managing all the notifications. That is a recipe for a complex, buggy mess.
So how in the world do we fix this disaster? Well, this is where the observer pattern walks onto the stage. It's a behavioral pattern that was literally invented to solve this exact kind of problem, this one-to-many notification mess, in a really clean, decoupled way.
So the official definition talks about a one-to-many dependency. Just think of it like this. You have one subject, that's our stock, and you have many observers. Those are our investors. When the subject state changes, like a price update, it just automatically tells all its observers. No drama, no fuss. That word automatically is where the magic really happens.
The whole thing works by setting up two very clear roles. First up is the subject. You could think of the subject as a broadcaster, like a radio station. It keeps a list of who's tuned in, and when it has news, it sends out a broadcast. Then you have the observers. They're the listeners. Their job is super simple. They just tune into the station they care about and then wait for updates. It's a beautiful, clean separation of jobs.
All right, enough theory. Let's see this in action. We're going to apply these roles, subject and observer, to our broken stock market code. And just watch as it transforms from this brittle mess into a system that's strong, flexible, and way, way easier to work with.
And here it is, the big reveal. Just look at this line and compare it to what we had before. Instead of _investor1 and _investor2, we now have one single generic list of something called iObserver. The stock class has no idea it's talking to an investor. It doesn't care. All it knows is that it's talking to things that can observe. This right here is the soul of decoupling. And would you look at that? All of our original problems, they've just vanished. We have loose coupling now. The stock class only cares about that general iObserver interface. We've got scalability. We can add 1,000, 1,000,000 investors to that list while the program is running, and we never have to touch the stock class code. And the best part, we've restored order. The stock is back to doing one job, managing its price. And a separate notification system handles the notifications. So clean.
Okay, so at this point, I can almost hear you thinking, this is really cool, but there are like a dozen other design patterns. Why is the observer the right one for this job? And you know what? That's a great question. Let's clear that up.
It really just comes down to using the right tool for the job. You wouldn't use a screwdriver to hammer a nail, right? Same idea here. A pattern like the strategy pattern is amazing for swapping out different algorithms, but it's not built for broadcasting updates. Chain of responsibility? That's for passing a single request down a line of handlers, one by one. But the observer pattern's one core job, to notify many dependents of a state change, that is a perfect tailor-made fit for our problem.
So let's bring this all back home. We've seen the theory, we've seen a real-world example, so how can you spot a situation in your own code where the observer pattern is exactly what you need?
Here's a super simple checklist you can use. First, are you seeing that one-to-many relationship? Do multiple objects need to react when one thing changes? Second, do you really want to break that hardwired connection between them? Third, do you need the freedom to add or remove listeners whenever you want while the program's running? And finally, do you just want to make your code easier to maintain by separating what an object is from who needs to know about it? If you're nodding your head yes to these, then the observer pattern is probably your new best friend.
So look, if you take away just one single thing from this, let it be this. The observer pattern is all about decoupling. It's about breaking those rigid bonds between your objects so you can build systems that are way more flexible, much easier to scale, and can actually handle change without falling apart. And that leaves me with one final question for you to take back to your own work. Think about the projects you're on right now. What's that one noisy object in your code base? You know the one? It's constantly screaming at a dozen other objects every time it changes? Yeah, that one. It might just be the perfect candidate to be a little quieter by using the observer pattern.